Welcome everyone to this unusual, slightly different reading that I have that I'm doing for this Friday. So it's kind of just a fun reading. I got a new oracle set of oracle cards and a new casting cloth. So I thought I'd just do a fun reading, for the weekend, and maybe it will develop into a kind of pick a card reading. Now, the reason that I'm kind of I've chosen these three decks is, a lot of my work revolves around the interplay of light and dark as symbolized by the sun and the moon in astrology. So, I do a lot of eclipse astrology and a lot of lunar phase astrology. And really, lunar phases are not really lunar phases. They are solely lunar phases. They represent the dance between the sun and the moon. And the interplay of dark and light that we see reflected on the face of the moon during the course of a lunar month. So I quite like this idea of, bringing the two sides together. And then, of course, there is the third type of light, or cosmic light, that we have in the universe, and that's the light of the stars. So this is going to be messages from the moon, the sun, and then the stars. So we'll pull one of these because this is a kind of an oracle deck with a single message. And then I thought we would pull some cards on the left side of the sheet to look at what we need to work on subconsciously, so messages from the moon, and then what we need to work on more consciously, or what events are kind of coming into play, and that will be messages from the sun. So let's try it out and see how it works, and we can sort of take things from there. Okay, so let's get into the reading. So here in the this is really interesting. So here in the sort of subconscious position, the unconscious position, is the 10 of spades. So this is in Caitlin Keegan's system. This is judgment. This is the card of judgment, but it's also the card of the 10 of swords. So this is really interesting. This is kind of about having to, it's almost like a wake-up call, having to sort of make a decision about something, possibly an announcement of some sort coming in, but this is, remember, for the subconscious. So it's almost as though something wants to kind of burst into your awareness that requires you to. It's almost like an aha moment, something that you might have been sensing, but haven't quite put your finger on yet. But you feel as though this something is wanting to kind of bubble up to the surface that is going to require you to either make a decision, or that is going to make you see something in a different perspective. So that's interesting incoming energy. Then here in the sort of current position, your present position, what you're aware of, we've got the Queen of Spades. So this is like the Queen of Swords. So it's almost as though on a kind of an emotional level, you are cutting out what isn't working anymore. But it can also be a card of strategy or emotional intelligence. So, just sort of boundaries. I would say maybe this is about emotional boundaries, sort of realizing what you want to sort of have more of and what you want to have less of. It's about kind of discernment to a large extent, emotional discernment when it comes to relationships, and also just being aware of your own feelings, so your own emotional landscape and what you want to sort of like have more of and what you want to have less of, and perhaps being a little bit stern with yourself possibly, as well as others. So just being very clear about what you want to cultivate and what you don't. So being very aware of ourselves in certain situations, particularly where we get triggered, and just sort of taking almost that kind of that slightly detached observer position, along with judgment, where we kind of look at how we react in certain situations, and almost take a step back, when we're in those situations, so that we don't react immediately. Because of course the Queen of Swords is the air element. So this is about emotional detachment to an extent, but also about emotional clarity, which is very, very interesting energy, especially when we look at it in relation to this Ten of Spades here. I think you might learn something about yourself, perhaps about maybe subconscious patterns, things that maybe you weren't aware of that trigger you or bother you, or perhaps you're kind of becoming aware of your knee-jerk reactions in certain situations, and maybe what needs to where you need to maybe pivot, make a slightly different decision, or work with this and kind of say, thank you for that information. I see what you're trying to tell me. And I'm going to sort of work with this in a more conscious way so that it's more empowering, basically. Wow. So isn't this a beautiful card? I just think these cards are so lovely. So this is the Nine of Clubs. And the Nine of Clubs is similar to the Nine of Pentacles in the tarot deck. So this is the Sun for Caitlin Keegan. And it's so interesting that it's coming up in the position of the Moon, because we do have this inversion, during this particular lunar phase. We've got the Moon in Leo, so that we've got the Moon in the sign of the Sun. So there is already an inversion kind of taking place within the solar lunar phases. And then on top of that, I've seen it so strongly in the last lot of geoscopes that I did for this particular Leo new moon, where there was this inversion, particularly in some of the readings. I think Capricorn in particular was one of the ones that really sort of jumps out to me now, where there's this enormous sort of like contrast or polarization between like what's happening in the 3D and what's happening in the 5D, which is causing a kind of a split in consciousness almost. So, and then there's also this mirror imaging happening, where there's a lot of where you would expect to find, say, lunar symbols, you're finding solar symbols and vice versa. And where you're expecting to find positive kind of symbols, you're finding negative, and again, vice versa. So I think it's this really interesting inversion of energy that's happening. And I think it's actually playing into what's happening, I think, kind of energetically for everybody at the moment, where the world that we've kind of relied on, the physical realm, to make decisions, or that we've considered to be the kind of basis of reality, is actually starting to not implode, but we're starting to realize that actually the true basis of reality is the opposite of what we thought it was. It's not the material, it's actually the spiritual, which is the realm of the consciousness of I hate to say mind, because it's not just mind, it's kind of it's spirit. So it's a mixture of body, mind, and soul. So anyway, the sun here is really about illumination. It's about enlightenment, it's about clarity, it's about success, it's about joy. So this is the potential that we have, kind of moving forward during this particular, or during this period, really, where we can move more into this kind of joyful energy through kind of clarity and through conscious decision making around our emotions. And that this may be sort of a real kind of, not a wake-up call per se, but it might be quite different to the way that you've operated in the past, consciously working with your emotions. And I think it's a really good time to do that, actually, when so much is kind of changing, and so much of our habits and things in the past are no longer relevant or helpful, you know, in the kind of current environment. So that's a really interesting message. So let's see what's coming through in the more conscious side. Wow. So this is so interesting. So here we've got the Eight of Hearts. So the Eight of Hearts is similar to the Eight of Cups in the tarot. And interestingly, Caitlin Keegan, she associates this with the card of the moon. Now, isn't this fascinating that we've got the sun in the conscious lunar position, and we've got the moon in the subconscious solar position? So what was I saying about these kind of mirror imaging, this mirroring, or this kind of inversion energy? This is, I mean, this is stunning, absolutely stunning example of what I'm talking about. So I think what we're not aware of, kind of, or what is sort of below our kind of our conscious horizon, shall we say, is the need to let go of something. So the moon here is often about confusion. It can be about fears. It can also be about needing, as I said, if we think of it in terms of the eight of cups, that it can be about, you know, either the need to sort of walk away from something or trusting our instincts. So, you know, you know, the cards, the way that Caitlin interprets them is the moon here is about subtlety, mystery, and instinct. So it's almost as though consciously we're becoming aware of how we make decisions here, subconsciously or through our gut instinct. This is kind of, I would say, our emotional intelligence. And I think it's almost saying to us that this week we need to rely more on our emotional intelligence in a way, and to consciously work with this. And that this is what's going to sort of bring us illumination. I think we're going to realize that, you know, the intellect is all very well, the conscious mind is all very well, but very often it's not an afterthought, but it's informed first and foremost by what is going on emotionally and kind of in terms of our kind of subconscious awareness. That this is really often where we make decisions from. So let's see what the next card is. So this is the card that's on your kind of conscious horizon. Oh, interesting. So this is the Two of Diamonds. Now this is actually the Two of Pentacles. I said that this was the Nine of Pentacles, but it's actually the Nine of Wands. Clubs, and I get a little bit mixed up. So clubs are wands. So the Two of Pentacles here, this is also the Two of Diamonds is also the High Priestess for Caitlin Keegan. So isn't this fascinating? Because in many respects, the High Priestess, you can see by her face, she's got half of her face is kind of dark and the other half is light. And then you've got the crescent moon symbol on her forehead. So I think this is kind of reiterating the message that we got from the Queen of Spades here and the Judgment card. That this week you might become aware of the fact that the way you make decisions is not necessarily as logical as you thought. That it's actually a combination of kind of instinct, intuition, and then rational decision making. And actually, that's probably you know, not a bad way to make decisions. I think that the key thing is to be aware of where we may have biases, like number one, and number two, where we may have certain what's the word? Where we may get stuck emotionally, so that we tend to view things from the position of, say, a wound or a past experience, so that this can filter, but not necessarily in a bad way, because I mean, of course, we learn from our difficult experiences. We learn not to repeat the same mistakes by remembering how we got hurt and that kind of thing. So I think it's just really, really, really becoming aware of the duality of the way that we think, and how this is not a bad thing. You know, this is something that's come up for me a lot during the last week or so, particularly when I was doing those geoscopes for the new moon readings. I noticed how there was very often a kind of polarity or contrast between what was happening in the 5D, what was happening in the 3D, and then also what was happening subconsciously versus kind of consciously. So I think this is going to help us come more into balance between our conscious and our subconscious mind, between our instinct and then between our kind of logical mind. So in other words, between the sun and the moon, which I think is really lovely. So the keywords that she uses for the moon here, or rather for the high priestess, so the 2 of diamonds, is juggling or multitasking. So in this sense, it's similar to the 2 of pentacles, which is actually, you could say it's about juggling, either or, but I think what we're being asked to do here is to have more flow between the 2, actually. You think of that infinity symbol. It's kind of joined. The two kind of loops are joined, and they don't stop. So I think it's about accepting and working with both. It's both and, not either or. And I think that's what is being kind of the message that's coming through quite strongly in this reading. Right, so then the last card, wow, isn't this fascinating? So now we've got another queen. This is the Queen of Hearts, so this is like the Queen of Cups. And this is all about intuition. It's about emotional intelligence, it's about intuition, it's about emotional balance. So in a way, I think reiterating the message here of the High Priestess, which is, she can literally sense what's going on below the surface. So here, what's going on with the moon. And she can, she honors this information, and she works with it in a way that is not going to suppress it. It's not going to say, oh, well, that's an inconvenient feeling, I'm going to sort of like squash that, but actually ask, why am I feeling that, and how can this be helpful to me? What messages are my emotions trying to tell me, kind of going forward? That if, for example, you have a negative emotion, it's because something within you is not being recognized or honored. So I think it's about kind of going, all right, well, I'm not going to judge that emotion. I'm going to say, what message does it have for me? And then how am I going to work with that more consciously, so that I can maybe have a better or different outcome in a situation, say, compared to last time. So the keywords for the Queen of Hearts, and interestingly, this is the Empress as well. It doubles as the Empress for Caitlin Keegan, is fertility and responsibility to nature. Now, I mean, this could be, responsibility to the earth, but it could also be about responsibility to our true nature. And I think that the more kind of, the more we honor our true nature and the way that we make decisions, and this is different for everybody, essentially. We all have these different, slightly different setups in terms of, solar placements, lunar placements, and how the 2 interact, for example, and then, of course, Mercury as well. For how we make decisions. And I think that this is really about being true to our nature. I think that's the overall kind of message that I'm getting from this reading, is coming more into a sense of coherence with who we really are, how we make decisions, and how we can work with this kind of innate wiring, so that we feel happier and more kind of in alignment, really, within ourselves. Because once we do that, there's less resistance within us, and we can kind of move forward in a more whole, a kind of a whole way. I think that's a really lovely message. So anyway, let's see what the universe has your back. So this is the message from the stars. Oh my, you cannot make this up. When I'm in alignment with the love of the universe, peace cannot be disrupted. And look, it's 2 flowers, and then in the middle we've got sort of a kind of a lunar image, but it could also be a solar image. It's got 3 layers, so mind, body, and spirit. I mean, what an absolutely beautiful message, to unify these two halves, really. So when I'm in alignment with the love of the universe, peace cannot be disrupted. And I think that is absolutely the message of this reading, is that when we acknowledge both sides of ourselves, both our emotional side and our logical side, or our kind of mental side, between our kind of subconscious body wisdom almost, and then our kind of our subconscious you know, the judgments that we make, or the preconceived ideas that we have, that we form through our experience very often, when we bring those together, this is when we come into alignment. It's not about like a single vision. It's about sort of a holistic vision. It's about wholeness, really. So what a lovely message. Yeah, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that that this proves to be helpful over the next week or so. Do let me know in the comments, you know, if it's proved helpful. I think particularly for light workers, healers, and those who are doing any kind of counseling, as well as anyone who is currently feeling a little bit confused about how to make an important decision. I think this reading is really useful and helpful, and kind of meant for you. But yes, do let me know how it's helped, and how it's resonated in the comments. And yes, have a lovely weekend and week.